actually our fourth annual Celebrate Day 366 event, talking about the state of Black mothers, fathers, and infants in Kansas. We're so grateful to have each of you join us on today. This is a great opportunity and we have a packed agenda. So I want to start by introducing who we are. We are the Kansas Sisters and Brothers for Healthy Infants, and this event is hosted by the Kansas Sisters and Brothers for Healthy Infants, which was founded by myself, Dr. Charlotte Smith, and Dr. Michelle Redmond, who has joined us. The Kansas Sisters and Brothers for Healthy Infants is members of graduate chapters of fraternities and sororities that work together to increase awareness around African American infants and maternal mortality. Black women and infants are more than 3 times as likely to die during birth than their white counterparts. This is partly because of systemic racism and racial discrimination. To put this into importance for everyone, the Black maternal and infant mortality rates today are worse than they were 15 years before the end of slavery. That is why it's important that this panel today sparks the conversation on the state of Black fathers, mothers, and infants in Kansas by unpacking the traumatic experiences of health inequities and structural racism. Our speakers will illuminate on how stress, racial discrimination, and health inequities impact them as Black fathers, mothers, and infants. Additionally, we will discuss the resources available to Black communities. Finally, we will close with a call to action as we open with a call to action. And we will also talk about how you can join us in our efforts of creating birth equity here in Kansas by using our Kansas Birth Equity Network. We are so grateful to have each and one of you with us today. I just want to go over a few housekeeping things before we start with our great panelists. First, we will briefly introduce each one of our panelists, okay? But their bios will be on our Facebook page and our website for you to look more into who they are after this event. We will start with our call to action from Broderick Crawford. Broderick Crawford is a Kappa. He is now one of the members of our Kansas Sisters and Brothers for Healthy Infants. He is also the executive director of NBC Community Development Incorporated. Broderick is also the founder of Every Baby to One. Help me in welcoming Broderick to do our call to action at the beginning of this great event.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share just a few words. I certainly want to thank the sponsors of the Celebrate Day 366, the good Dr. Charlotte Smith and her team for their commitment, dedication, and leadership. If not now, when? If not here, where? And if not you, who? I'm sure this is a very familiar phrase many of you have heard in the past. I can't think of a time this is more relevant than what we here in Kansas are currently experiencing, in fact, the nation today as it relates to maternal and infant mortality. COVID-19 has unmasked racial bias in health that has been present for a number of years. Social unrest and racist practices by society towards Blacks and other communities of color have been exposed. Let me be clear, for many of us, this is old news. For some of you, this may be new. Why is that? Unfortunately, many Americans still live in isolated bubbles of community and make the statements that only happens over there, that doesn't happen here, are phrases we often hear in select communities. Today, we celebrate Day 366. This year is the 4th annual community birthday party, celebrating baby's first year. It is a special event where the community celebrates babies who have made it to their 366th day and educate new and expecting mothers, fathers, caregivers, family members on infant safe sleep practices and infant mortality crisis in the state of Kansas. Initially started in Sedgwick County, this event has now expanded to Wyandotte County, again specifically targeting Black fraternities and sorority family members. Here in Wyandotte County, I've had the pleasure of working with Every Baby to One, a program that looks at safe sleep, safe space, and social support in faith-based communities. My purpose here is to call us to action, to exhort or stimulate you to do something in order to achieve an aim or deal with a problem. Don't we know the problem? So what is our aim? You will hear later the status of health, and the facts are clear. Infant mortality in Wyandotte and Sedgwick counties are the worst in the state of Kansas. And the state of Kansas itself is one of the worst in the country. This also impacts the behavioral and mental health of our mothers, our fathers, and our families. Today, we brought together men and women of the Divine Nine, members of each of the Black fraternities and sororities in our society. As educated men and women, we have an obligation and responsibility to lead by example. What are you willing to do? What is the price of maternal and infant mortality? Can we continue to almost allow one baby per month to die? What are you each willing to contribute, both personally and financially, to change? Are you willing to educate or bring awareness to your coworker, fraternity or sorority brother and sister, your neighbor, even your family member when you see inappropriate behavior? I'll share my personal story. When I started working with Every Baby to One, I learned in my church alone there were 16 women who had lost children before their first birthday. My pastor's wife was one of them. Our former mayor's wife is one of them. My own mother lost two, and I did not realize that until 3 years ago. We're often told in our families, don't air your dirty laundry. Well, infant mortality has been kept hidden and has become a sickness in our families. Women are forced to bear both physical and mental burdens that they were not designed for. During the Civil Rights Movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph Abernathy, Jesse Jackson, John Lewis, Julian Bond, C.T. Vernon, Whitney Young Jr., and many others of all fraternities walked together to effect change. I challenge you, will each of you in your organization have the courage to become agents of change? Are we just interested in a feel-good moment? Do we want to do good work, or are we willing to do what's necessary to have a significant impact? Significant impact does have our cost. Later today, you will hear from experts panelists who will share key statistics and information related to maternal and infant mortality in Kansas. As I close, it is time to take health equity and infant mortality off the back burner, out of the living rooms, out of the closets of people of color and families of our fellow fraternal brothers and sisters. We must put it where it belongs, front and center, and the cover story in our hearts and minds. Infant mortality is indeed a public health crisis that must be eradicated. This is necessary for the health of our families, our communities, both in urban and rural areas in our state and our country. If not now, when? If not here, where? If not you, who? Thank you, and enjoy the presentations.
Thank you so much for that powerful call to action. Thank you. That is great. We need to have these discussions. These discussions are vital to our community, and we must make this normal for every individual to be able to talk about the traumatic experiences that they have, whether it's systemic racism or racial discrimination. We're going to have our first panel, which is the state of Black parents and the impact on the community. Welcome, welcome, and help me welcome our panelists to this event. We have with us Mr. and Mrs. Bronson Irvin and Angela Scott.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
We have Mr. and Mrs. Chris and Anya Scott with us. We have Mr. and Dr. Ray and Jalen Sims. Thank you. Reverend and Dr. Gary and Crystal Lumpkins.
Morning.
Good morning. All right, we're going to just jump right in and start our discussion. So our first question to our panelists is to help our audience understand concerns of the state of Black fathers and mothers in Kansas. In your opinion, share with us what infant mortality means to you and how it affects the community. I'll start with the Scott and Irvin family.
Thank you, Charla. Just again for the opportunity to be here today as parents. You know, when you ask, what does the state of, Black women health and infant mortality mean to us? I think it means our lives. It means our child's life. I can say that as I consider a fairly learned member of the community, you hear statistics. Mr. Crawford laid out some statistics and it just rolled out, but they were staggering. One baby a month dying. That was many people I know, that was their child. That could have been my child, that could have been me. So when you ask what this means to us, I think it definitely means that we have to be a part of this work, for our lives. And so this work means advocating, right? Talking about access to care issues, speaking about our experience, feeling open, feeling like it's something I know when I talk to him about doing this. I almost had to be like, recall our experience, right? Because it's not normative for you to look at these things and call them out as problematic. And that must change, right? So this culture of giving voice to what the issue looks like and the concerns around women giving birth in this country. Did you have anything to add?
I would say for our experience that from the time that you realize that a child is coming, there's already a fear associated with that, because the woman has to get through the pregnancy with low stress, nourishment, and you have to go out into society to where people will stereotype you as a Black woman, especially if the father isn't present. They just give you a certain level of service based upon a woman carrying a child. And when the child arrives, you're still fearful because you still have to get that child up until the first 18, 24 months before you can feel comfortable. And just that whole process and just having to pay close diligence.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for those words of wisdom. Now we'll hear from Mr. and Dr. Sims.
Hi, thanks for having us. What does it mean to us? Number one, death of an innocent child that could have been prevented. Sometimes due to lack of support for families, to find providers who will take their human lives seriously. Lack of resources that allows mothers and parents to get answers to their questions, or just get community resources, finances to allow for safe sleep environments, and of course, many others. Then of course, after the fact, there's a lack of ongoing support. It's like death happens, then everybody else goes on and does their normal activities while the person is still hurting, and the person has no resources to, pick up and move forward in life. And then from our standpoint, of course, I was in a hospital where I was known. And because of our status in the hospital, my care was expedited and I had great care. But what about the person who had public insurance, or the one that didn't know, or the one that wasn't known? I was a physician in my own hospital. But what about that person that is just the regular patient population that I take care of, with no one to advocate for them? It completely changes the situation. And so, like Angela said, what it means is that we have to be doing things like this, reaching out, advocating, and teaching each other how to advocate for themselves, so that, our lives are not going to be at stake.
I think for me, it was a wake-up call, having a daughter that was in a NICU for 30 days. I remember prior to learning the gender of my daughter, I asked one of my good friends, what did he want to have when he was when his wife was pregnant, he used to always say, I just wanted a healthy baby. At the time, I wanted a boy, and so
And I wanted a healthy baby.
And so I didn't understand the meaning of that. So when she delivered early and she was in the hospital for 10 days, her vital signs was just going off the charts. I didn't know if she was going to live or not. And then I would go up to the next floor, have to check on my daughter. She had tubes coming out. You know, it was really a tough situation, you know, to spend, and I was exhausted. I remember sometimes just walking to the elevators to go home, to take a shower and come back. And so seeing the other kids, the babies in the NICU, seeing their parents that really, you knew they didn't really have an understanding of what their child was going through. Some would come and just drop off milk and leave. There was a baby in there, last name was Sims. They had to resuscitate him like several times. He went in and out. They had to do the procedures. His heart stopped working. It was just tough through that whole experience. So seeing that and experiencing that, it was a wake-up call for me, and it really enlightened me on what life means for not just the child, but for the mom as well, because I was facing the reality is that I could be raising my daughter by myself if my wife didn't make it. And so I spent nights, I think she was in there for 10 days, and it was just a tough situation to go through. And my daughter, just seeing her ups and downs that she had while she was at the NICU, you know, I didn't know if she was going to live sometimes or not. So I just remember all that time, and it's very hurtful to talk about it and to think about it to this day. But seeing her smile every day and walk around the house is a blessing for me. So I definitely understand what immortality is for our children.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now we'll hear from Mr. and Mrs. Barnett.
Thanks, Charla, for the opportunity and the platform. I'm a huge advocate of Day 366, and I appreciate what you and Dr. Redmond are doing in our community. This is very important to us. We are the parents to 4 amazing, non-conforming, carefree Black kids. And so this hits us in our hearts. And it was a difficult journey for us as well. Not only was the pregnancy difficult for more than one of my pregnancies, for a couple of our births, it was very traumatic. When we think about the statistics, right, the United States has the highest infant and maternal mortality rate among developing countries. That could be a full stop right there. But actually for women that look like me, it goes further. The statistics for Black women are even more egregious. And so when you're thinking about having a child, like BJ said earlier, not only are you thinking about the stresses of becoming a parent, you also have the stress of going into a hospital and not coming out. You have the stress of, like Mr. Sims said, possibly being a single parent from preventable causes. So this is very near and dear to our heart. We're very passionate about this, and we have to see these numbers in these cases improving, not just for me, but for my kids, for the next generation. We should not still be doing this in 20, 30 years, trying to figure out what's going on, what's the disconnect, why are we losing people if we are such an innovative and developed and pioneering country. We need to step up to the plate for all women, but especially for Black women.
She's right. But no, okay. Yes, this is very near and dear to us because I know personally, as a father, as a husband, the worry about going into a hospital and not knowing if your wife is going to come out or if your child is going to come out the hospital. Because I've seen, I mean, we were there, you know, with our last child, and it was chaos. And again, just from the moment that you find out that you're having a baby, you're on edge. You're on edge because you know that, like my wife said, Black women are not protected. They're not thought about like that. Black women go to the hospital and don't get the same kind of treatments as everyone else. And that is an absolute shame. And especially when, you know, Black women are pregnant. So now you're not taking care of Black women as you should. which then means you're not taking care of the baby coming as you should, which then is just stress for everybody. So as a husband, as a father, I mean, I'm like beyond grateful to see my wife go in and have kids multiple times and our kids be here healthy and kids as much as kids can be, but just the stress of the pregnancy and the care, it's a lot. And yes, the US is supposed to be innovators of technology and innovators of this and innovators of that. And somehow in 2020, there's no innovation to make sure that Black women can go in and just deliver a baby and everything will be fine.
Hello.
That's crazy. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that great insight and for bringing those statistics to our attention. Next, we will hear from Reverend and Dr. Lumpkins.
Good morning, Dr. Smith. As it was just echoed, thank you so much for allowing us to have this opportunity on this platform. Dr. Redmond, thank you for all that you're doing. I'll just echo a lot of what the sentiments that were shared. We are parents of 3 beautiful children and had very different experiences. We lived, the first was born in New Mexico and the last 2 in Kansas. And our first one, first child, just a lot of issues. But what I do want to make sure that I say back that the Barnetts were talking about, that it is unfortunate that we live in a country that, is supposed to have all healthcare, all these different things. And we are seeing these statistics. It is just unimaginable, and it should not be happening. And as a public health researcher, I look at, all the other disparities that we're experiencing. And if we look at the infant mortality rates, that speaks to life expectancy, that speaks to a lot of other things. And so we should be ashamed of ourselves. So, just the infant mortality, especially among African Americans, is inexcusable. And so I just really appreciate this forum and 366, because I have to admit, I have been afforded opportunities. Like Dr. Sims, you said, we, educated backgrounds, we were very proactive with trying to get the information we needed when we had our first and our other children, but still there was some gaps with the one in, with Israel. So just again, really fortunate to be here and to actually, it's making me, okay, this is something I need to be a part of.
Oh, absolutely. Again, thank you for this forum. Wanting to center in on what I heard a lot of people say regarding stress, especially from the male perspective, and the effect of this. And you probably know where from a spiritual component that I'm going to always look at how this affects faith in our community and all of that. What happens when you come home? When you expect to come home with a child and the baby seat is empty, the effects on the faith, the family doesn't show up for the family gathering. They stop going to church. They stop praying. You see the cycle. And so this togetherness and how it affects the community is drastic. We talk about knowledge. My people perish for lack of knowledge. But even when we don't have knowledge, many times, or when we do have knowledge, like we said, the racial and other inequities just overcome us. And so that understanding of prayer and those types of things to help us cope, even in this time of racial injustice all over. Imagine with everything else going on right now, you having to deliver a baby right now. That's emotionally devastating, but God is where I'm gonna stop it right there. So thanks.
Thank you so much. All right, we are getting into the weeds. We have one more question. So I'll just ask that each group of panelists during this session give us a 1-minute response, but this one is pretty heavy. Institutional racial bias that claims Black people are not as sensitive to pain as white people, subsequently influenced the fact that Black women have the highest maternal mortality rate, dying at 2.5 times more than white women in 2018 and 3 times more than white women in 2019. Not to mention the racial unrest that our Black males must face. Until our country take the pound protect Black women and pound protect Black men to heart, it's the world against Black men and women. How do you feel about the Black women are strong stereotype? And what can we do as a community to protect our Black women and Black men? We're going to start with Mr. and Dr. Sims.
It makes me a little irritated about that, but let me just say something first. Women are considered, well, Black women are considered strong because of a lot of the things that we've had to endure over the years. But let's take it all the way back to slavery days, when the fathers of GYN were performing procedures on the Black slaves without anesthesia in order to critique and develop a lot of the surgeries that we do today. And it was because they were the strong ones. So you bring that all the way up, and we still have these same mentalities, which basically comes into our structural and systemic racism. And we say, well, when she calls out, she's fine, I'll go see her in the morning. Or, oh, just give her a little bit of pain medicine and she's fine. Oh, well, that's fine. She did lose a lot of blood in her surgery, so she's gonna be okay. And then by the time she's actually finally listened to, it's like, oh, she's near death. I should have came sooner. So the Black women are strong mentality, we really have to like overcome by basically wiping out this systemic racism, because that's something that was developed years and years and years ago that we're just still doing to this day. So everything else has fast forwarded and become, more, innovative, but we still have that same mentality from what we had back in slavery days. So how do I feel about that? Hate it. I wish it was better. What can we do about that? We can advocate by, one, for me, because I am an OBGYN, making sure that the people that I am teaching, as far as our residents, making sure that they are actually listening to the patients when they call out. What else can we do? Empower our patients to escalate. So if the nurse doesn't come, then you call out and you ask for the doctor. Well, if the doctor doesn't come, you call out and you ask for the hospital administrator.